Five Nights at Freddy's. Oh boy, where do I even start with this game? Five Nights at Freddy's has become a horror gaming icon, spanning a new genre being mascot horror, with many games, books, and toys, some good toys, some bad ones, to its name. It's no doubt this game was a triumph in the horror games landscape, seeing grown adults being terrified of an animatronic bear, bunny, chicken, and fox, and maybe a golden bear on occasions. Editor me, play the highlights of 2014.
Don't you, bitch! Whoa, 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 whoa! Close yourself in.
The sweet sound of nostalgia. Don't you miss it? The game was already receiving countless sequels, already expanding the series. Then, one idea would evolve into one of the largest production stories I have ever seen in Hollywood. And that's why we are here to talking about a story of trial and error, delays after delays, multiple scripts, and determination to do a film that took close to almost 10 years to get done. I present to you the story of the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. Cut to April of 2015. Five Nights at Freddy's was still ruling the internet with Let's Plays and already 3 games under its belt. A second game that took the first game and turned it up to 11. And a third game that's, it's there. I mean, we went from Five Nights at Freddy's 2 to giving us reactions like this. To this.
Are you gonna pop up as soon as I put this down? I have a feeling you will! Man!
But Five Nights at Freddy's, it was the first game for a lot of people that genuinely didn't actually scare them. I mean, it did give us a clear outline of Purple Guy's demise, and finally kinda gave closure on the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise of the souls being finally freed and being put to rest. And we all kind of thought that was the end of it. How naive we were. That was only 2015. That was only the beginning. But after that, we all were waiting to see what was going to happen next. And soon, one headline would shake the world.
Warner Brothers Pictures has just picked up the rights and is going into development on a feature film adaptation of the popular game Five Nights at Freddy's.
But I think there's some potential here. So for me, this is going to be a buy.
This is a huge buy for me if they do it right. And it.
Well, it was official. Five Nights at Freddy's was getting a movie. This was insane for a game that hasn't even been out for a year, yet was crazy. And everyone was super excited for this. The game had such an eerie atmosphere, and for this to be adapted into a movie would be perfect. The movie would be under Warner Brothers Pictures. Rory Lee, David Katzenberg, and Seth Graham-Smith were set to produce it. And then we had an announcement later on that Gil Kenan was announced as the director for the film. The director had some horror movies under his belt, like Poltergeist, which wasn't that great. But he also had the classic Monster House, which was received very well. And, wait, Monster House came out 17 years ago? My god. And obviously, Scott Cawthon would obviously be under watch of the film. Everyone was pretty hyped. And obviously, you already know, film adaptations have not been the best at all. I mean, we have obviously the first Mario movie, you got the first Mortal Kombat, which was okay, then Street Fighter, and it just kept going, and up to now, they still weren't even that great. I think to the point where most film adaptations, every single time a new film adaptation would come out, everyone would say, "This is the movie that'll break the video game curse," and then it doesn't. And it was honestly just a dragged corpse of a genre that nobody saw a triumph at all. But everyone had faith in this. Producer Seth Graham and Smith said the filmmakers wanted to turn the indie horror game into an insane, terrifying, and weirdly adorable movie. Cawthon is quoted saying he believes the story of Five Nights at Freddy's, in which a player must survive in nights trapped in Chuck E. Cheese-like pizza joint inhabited by murderous animatronic mascots, really tends to itself being a movie. And this is quoted by him himself. And yes, that could work, but you really gotta have the right people behind it, and you need a really good script for this, because most video game movies may have a good premise, but execution, not great. And I could probably make an entire video talking about all the horrible video game adaptations, but I'm sure there's countless videos of that out there. But still, when I first heard about this, I was still very, very excited. My introduction to Five Nights at Freddy's began all the way back in the school year of 2014. I was at a new school and I was hearing a bunch of people at the cafeteria talking about this new game, Five Nights at Freddy's. And I was hearing all these terms, the purple guy, and I was hearing about YouTubers called Markiplier and Jacksepticeye and iHasCupcake, and I never even heard of all these people. And I came up to, and I still remember his name, Christopher. And if you're watching this, hey Christopher, you're in this video now. And he told me about Five Nights at Freddy's. He showed me Markiplier's first video, and I didn't get to see the whole thing because obviously we were in school. But when I got home, the first thing I did was open up that YouTube video and watch it. The game was very scary. And honestly, even after watching Markiplier's video, I still wanted to play it. I went up to my mom and dad and asked them if I could get the game. And they didn't know what it was, so they said, "Let's see a video of the game." And naive me showed them the Markiplier video. It's a classic video, but is it the best impression of someone to play the game? No, not really. They sat through the whole video, and they just looked back at me and said, "Yeah, we're not letting you play this game, it's too scary." And I was kinda sad. Even though the game was very scary, I was pretty upset that I couldn't play the game myself. But at the same time, of course, they would let me play Mortal Kombat, they would let me play Doom, all the goriest games out there. But when it comes to Five Nights at Freddy's, there's not a single droplet of gore in the main gameplay, minus the game over screen. And, whatever, fine. I mean, eventually, Five Nights at Freddy's would release demos that were free, and, then I finally got my hands to playing on the game. My first game was FNAF 2. Maybe that's why it's my favorite game. But getting off topic, I actually was really excited, and a lot of my friends back then also were really hyped. And then, after all of this, we waited. And we waited. And we waited. Around this time, we all thought the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise was over, but nope. After everybody criticizing Five Nights at Freddy's 3, Scott Cawthon did not want to end the franchise on a pretty bad note. And then we got Five Nights at Freddy's 4, which amplified the horror to the max. And that was one game I was not playing, because that game is almost mandatory to wear headphones. And me, I was not playing that game. I've played every single Five Nights at Freddy's games, but I feel like that game I'm just gonna leave alone. Because I've beaten all the Five Nights at Freddy's games on console, on a big TV, with surround sound speakers. So, playing a game like that would not do me justice. I still have flashbacks to Five Nights at Freddy's 2, and that puppet jump scare literally rocking my basement with those surround sound speakers, so I never even touched that game. But we waited and we waited, and nothing came up. But while we wait, let's see what NQ Productions thought of when this first movie was announced.
When I first heard about the FNAF movie back in 2015, I was so excited. Seeing one of my favorite franchises get turned into a movie adaptation for the big screen was just so cool to hear. Then in 2017, the project got handed over to Blumhouse Productions. Now, at the time, in 2017, I had no idea what Blumhouse was known for. Then, after doing a little bit of research, my excitement level went from here all the way up to here. Discovering that Blumhouse was known for its horror projects and now they were working on a series known for its horror just made this FNAF movie way more exciting and intriguing than it ever was before. When the movie was originally a Warner Brothers production, you had no idea what direction the movie would go in. But with a Blumhouse production, you know exactly what it's going to be. A scary ass movie. And even though this movie had to suffer through multiple delays, potential cancellations, and a whole bunch of rewrites, we did eventually and finally got a release date, we got a cast, and now it's finally here for everyone to see.
Thanks to NQ Productions for coming on for this video. He's got some great videos, not just for FNAF, but for a bunch of other things, so make sure to go check him out. But, like NQ Productions said, we're nowhere near close done with this story. There's a long way to go. And then suddenly, we heard terrible news that the Five Nights at Freddy's movie was canceled. Why, you may ask? Well, let's find out. Well, time would go on, and new FNAF games would release. And the year after, we would get Five Nights at Freddy's sister location, a really great game in my opinion, except for the fourth night, that was took us out of the security office and spiced it up a bit. And around this time, we were still waiting. What happened to the Five Nights at Freddy's movie? It's been about a year now and still nothing. Then another year goes by. And soon we heard the news that the Five Nights at Freddy's movie was canceled by Warner Brothers. Now, when projects are kept in limbo like this and there's no news, there's usually something going on, and people started to wonder if this movie was still even happening, was it just taking a really long time? And Warner Brothers broke the silence. There was lots of reasons for the FNAF movie being canceled by Warner Brothers, but the list goes as follows. 1. The animatronics could not successfully work on set. Now that's pretty surprising for a company like Warner Brothers. They have all the budget in the world, and you'd think they have the money to be able to make these work on set, but maybe this movie was limited to a budget that it just wouldn't work out. I'm not really sure Warner Brothers was necessarily known at that time for crazy animatronic shots. I mean, around this time, everyone was leaving practical effects and maybe just trying this out for the first time and bringing these characters that have been known for about a year or so, turning them into lifelike animatronics and really doing all this stuff may have been a little difficult. But I feel like they should have been able to crack it down. It doesn't sound too hard, from especially what would follow in later years. The second option was Warner Brothers just couldn't hold the film rights to Five Nights at Freddy's. Usually when something like this is lasting too long, they usually have a contract for how long this will go on for. And it looks like that contract was eventually expiring, and when Warner Brothers saw that the project was going nowhere, they just dropped the rights entirely. And coming up was that the final story for Five Nights at Freddy's wasn't really set in stone yet. They were really only basing this off the first game. And honestly, to the general audience, and also the directors and writers, there wasn't a cohesive Five Nights at Freddy's story. We didn't piece this whole thing together until many years later down the line. So they would really be making a movie that wasn't completely accurate to the games, and you know how much that pisses people off. The franchise's story wasn't completely finished with one movie. There would be no leeway for a sequel or anything like that. And it looks like Warner Brothers had other ideas ready in place. they had two other movies in place that they really wanted to get done. One of them was Ready Player One. Obviously, this movie was the opposite of practical effects. It is a CGI fest. And honestly, when that movie released, I did enjoy it. It was a nice movie. And they also wanted to favor in another video game movie, being the Minecraft movie. Now, Minecraft, instead of Five Nights at Freddy's, Minecraft has been around way longer than Five Nights at Freddy's has been. And making that movie around that time, the Minecraft franchise has a little more leeway into making a cohesive story that isn't too complicated and people could just follow. And I could see why Warner Brothers would most likely favor that over Five Nights at Freddy's. And it seemed like Five Nights at Freddy's directors just kept coming in and out of the project. It looks like when a project like this is in limbo, a director's gonna want to direct another film. They're not just gonna sit there and wait for the writers to come up with a screenplay, so it just kept coming in and out. And Scott had just announced on Steam that the movie was cancelled. A lot of people were upset with this, but they were tons of other reasons, like the budget may have been too expensive for Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers, like I said, hasn't gone to practical effects in a while around this time, and there were just struggles of the plot of the movie since there wasn't a cohesive story yet, and obviously, which we all know, Scott Cawthon was just not satisfied for how the movie was turning out. Scott Cawthon just wasn't satisfied with Warner Brothers' version, and he didn't really like how it set up the story. And, that's fair enough to Scott. This game became very popular, and a terrible video game movie could really put a big stain on it. And, it was way too quick to make a movie anyway, so Scott got to work on other games, and the Five Nights at Freddy's movie kinda just snapped out of existence. We all kinda thought it was over, but one thing happened. One thing I didn't expect, and a lot of people did not expect. It looks like years later, Warner Brothers would go through the trash bin looking through old screenplays that never made it to the big screen, or any screen for that matter. And they found something, and they turned that screenplay into one of the most unexpected movies I have ever seen.
I just really want your brother's birthday to be perfect.
We're gonna have so much fun!
Oh no, that was a real movie. If you have not heard of this movie, bless your soul. Warner Brothers after this decided to create the Banana Splits movie. And, it's certainly a movie. I really cannot believe that Warner Brothers chooses, out of all the franchises you could possibly make about an animatronic gang of characters killing people, is the Banana Splits? And I don't even think the Banana Splits were even animatronics. No, they weren't. So why pick a very, very old Hanna-Barbera cartoon and turn it into a horror movie? I don't know where Hollywood is getting these ideas from, but I actually do believe that this probably was a recycled screenplay from the original FNAF movie. And surprise, surprise, this movie was supposed to release around 2019. Now this isn't confirmed, but this is speculated that the original FNAF movie for Warner Brothers was supposed to release around this time. And I guess Warner Brothers didn't want to completely throw this out the window, and you have to grace your eyes on the Banana Splits movie. Directed by Deniska Esterhazy, the Banana Splits movie was kind of set to be a comedy and also a horror movie. This screenplay is definitely a reimagining of the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, but this franchise started all the way back in 1968, so to really revise this franchise in this way is pretty surprising. And voices from the original Banana Splits actually do return, such as Eric Bazula. I definitely read that wrong, sorry. But the Banana Splits movie basically follows a family attending a live taping of the show and trying to survive the night, of course, surviving the night, of titular characters that go haywire upon seeing the upcoming cancellation of the show, starting a killing spree around the studio. That's certainly a plot for a horror movie. And, how well did it apply to the movie? It's a movie, like I said. It's really hard to determine whether this is just so bad it's good, or it's just straight up bad. And where I would place that, it's in the middle. Are the characters bland? Yeah. Are the animatronics, okay? Yeah, they're fine, but you could tell it's people in costumes, and it's just metallically making the costumes look like that to make it look like they're animatronics. And the budget definitely keeps it to a minimum that it's not too much of a CGI fest. And regarding the actual storyline, it just goes off the rails. And you have these little scenes of, well, for starters, this is a very hard R movie. The movie takes advantage of its R rating. There is a lot of gore, there is a lot of everything. Everything the FNAF movie definitely could not do. The FNAF movie still has a pretty big young audience, so the FNAF movie could not do any of this at all, and Warner Brothers just did everything they wanted with this movie. The director was known for a few horror movies, some good, some bad. The only movie I've really watched is Level 16, which was okay, but it's alright. And regarding this movie, it comes to mind every now and then, and I've rewatched it about like 2 times, well, 1 time including researching for this video, and it's just a movie. And my dad was actually a pretty big fan of the Banana Splits growing up, and when I heard this movie was being made, I was thinking about telling my dad about this movie. I didn't know he watched the Banana Splits as a kid. So I said, "Father, do you know about the Banana Splits?" And he says, "Yes, I loved that show back when I was a kid growing up." And then I paused, and I was like, I don't think I should show him this. And he said, "Oh, why? Why are you asking me if I watched the Banana Splits?" "Oh, no reason, just asking." I have yet to tell him about this movie. And Dad, if you're watching this video, yeah, I'm sorry they ruined your childhood. Stay far, far away from this movie if you want to keep your childhood intact. And I'm sure that ruined it for a lot of people. And after this movie, people did kind of know the Banana Splits exist now, because before that movie, I definitely did not know that they existed. It's one of the few Hanna-Barbera characters that just fell out of obscurity, and definitely did start to show up in other forms of media, but yeah, that movie is just, it's a trip. It's a trip. And that was one out of another kind of FNAF movie-ish that people decide to replicate since the movie was taken too long. We'll get to you later. But it was a period to think that the FNAF movie was practically cancelled, and I'm not really the only one. We have another special guest today, Rye Toast. We'll see what he has to say about what he thought of this situation. Take it away.
Hey everybody, Rye Toast here. I make FNAF theories and other related videos on YouTube. Back in 2015, when they canceled the movie and Warner Brothers was like, "Hey, we're not doing this anymore," I thought that was the nail in the coffin, to be honest. Like, I always thought that a FNAF movie was kind of like a pipe dream, because I feel like we hear about movie announcements so quickly with games. Like, I'm pretty sure there's already a Poppy Playtime movie that had been announced after the first chapter came out. And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like, the FNAF movie got announced 8 years ago, and we haven't heard anything about that. So I assume that, like, a movie announcement, if there's no real backing to it, it's just, like, for hype. So I thought it honestly was that for a while. And when Warner Brothers dropped the movie and it And when Warner Brothers dropped the movie and it kind of got canceled, I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess we're not getting a FNAF movie. I mean, I'm really happy in retrospect that they did, because thinking about it, I don't think Warner Brothers would have done as good or faithful as a job as Blumhouse did. And I don't think that's necessarily a knock on Warner Brothers or saying that Blumhouse is like inherently better, but I think Blumhouse, like Steve Blum and the like whole, is it Steve? It's just that I feel like Blumhouse, and to an extension Jason Blum, I think they are more acutely aware of the fan base behind this movie and the respect that this franchise kind of needed to be done well. And also, because it got canceled in 2015, it's coming out after movies like Detective Pikachu, the Sonic movie, this Mario movie. So this idea of like a video game movie curse kind of is broken at this point. So with all of this going for it and Blumhouse giving it the respect and attention it deserves, I feel like this is the best case scenario, and none of this would have happened if it was never canceled in 2015. So at the time I was shocked and kind of like, well, I guess we're not getting a movie. But now in retrospect, I do think it was for the best. I also don't know if you want an outro, so if you do, here you go. I don't even know what to do for an outro midway through a video.
Thanks to Rytos for coming on for this video. It's a really big help, and his videos are really good. If you go check out his channel, he's got some great theory videos and a bunch more on Five Nights at Freddy's, so I definitely recommend to go give him a watch after this video. But yeah, after Warner Brothers completely disappearing from the project, one other studio would step up above all the others and finally acquire the rights to Five Nights at Freddy's. Was the studio? Well, I think you guys know them pretty well. Let's get back to March of 2017. Around this time, it was pretty quiet about the future of Five Nights at Freddy's. Sister Location has released about a few months ago, with a pretty interesting ending, and we're kind of all waiting for the next FNAF game to release. And regarding Five Nights at Freddy's finally being dropped by Warner Brothers, the project was kind of given up by most people. But surprisingly, a lot of movie studios still wanted the rights to Five Nights at Freddy's. But now, Scott was pretty picky. He wasn't just gonna give any movie studio his child that he's been working on for so long and just for them to possibly ruin it. But after a while, as many people consulting Scott about all their amazing screenplays they could do for Five Nights at Freddy's, it didn't really get to Scott that they would actually turn out good. And honestly, I think he made the great choice. We talked about the banana splits. He made a good choice. But soon, one studio would come to him, or should I say one man, that would change his perspective and would continue this movie project all the way till the end. And that production studio is Blumhouse Productions. Under their parent company, Universal Pictures, they actually came to Scott about this movie, specifically Jason Blum, of course. Jason Blum is the CEO of Blumhouse, and Blumhouse is known for their very scary movies. Recently, Blumhouse has been kicking off movies such as the recent Halloween trilogy, which started off pretty good, had a pretty interesting middle, and the finale was kind of okay. But they had plenty upon plenty of really amazing horror films that they're just known for. And this is a perfect studio to make a Five Nights at Freddy's movie with. So, Scott gave them the rights, and it was official. On March 30th, 2017, a bunch of news outlets had come out and say, yeah, Blumhouse is now working with Scott Cawthon, and the FNAF movie is still alive. I myself and lots of other people were super hyped about this news. The game was finally gonna be brought to the big screen. This time through an actual studio that knows what they're doing, and a lot of people have faith in it. Jason Blum, of all people, really did like Five Nights at Freddy's, and he was really excited to bring this game to life. But all we were left with for the time being was this infamous picture, well, not infamous, well, famous picture, that I'm sure lots of you guys from 2017 will probably just get nostalgic just looking at it. But obviously the picture with Blumhouse Productions in the back, and a chair with Freddie's name on it. And it all goes uphill from there. A few bumps in the road, but it just went completely bonkers from there. One thing that I'm pretty sure everybody appreciated, that Scott was a lot more vocal about what was going on within Blumhouse than it did with Warner Brothers. It looked like Warner Brothers didn't really let him speak that much during the production, so that's why it was so pretty much radio silent. But he had a lot to say throughout the months that this movie was still in production with Blumhouse. And he had a lot to say. A few months before we heard the announcement of Blumhouse being with the FNAF movie, we finally heard what Scott had to say about the situation regarding Warner Brothers. He couldn't specifically get into details, but we later found out those details within the studio in later years. But he had said this. Hey guys, I know that I promised some movie news by the end of the month, so here it is. Keep in mind that there are still very important discussions in progress, so the amount of information that I can share is extremely limited. In fact, even the information I can share has to remain somewhat cryptic. The reality is that last year the FNAF movie was met with several delays and roadblocks, some involving problems within the movie industry as a whole. As a result, as right now, the movie is back to square one. Square one is something we would hear for a long time about this movie. And as time would go on, we would get somewhere and then go back to square one. It was a constant period that a lot of FNAF fans were getting used to at this point, until we heard a really amazing director was coming on the project. It would not take long to figure out that we almost got Chris Columbus to direct the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. Now, if you don't know who this guy is, that's very surprising. If you're a big Harry Potter fan, you know exactly who this is. He's directed lots of these movies and is a well-established director that could really do any type of genre. So after people heard this, the FNAF movie had some good building blocks to it. It had a good director, it was under a studio that knows what it's doing. Scott believes in Jason and Jason believes in the project, so it looked like it was all smooth sailing from there. Until time went on again. And then November of 2017, Scott came out and said, "Hey guys, I just wanted to make a quick post with some updates on current projects. First of all, I know I promised movie news soon, but I guess that news will have to wait. It had to do with some exciting cast and crew additions, but things are not quite finalized yet, so I'll give them more time." Now, the fact that there was a cast in place makes me wonder who they could have been. This is one thing we actually don't know for sure. There was only one actor that kinda gave us an idea if he was gonna be in the movie or not, and that was Jack Black. And that was a very long time after that, but still, it looks like they had a cast in place, but I guess that too, like the rest, fell out of place. Time went on again. Eventually, we would get Five Nights at Freddy's Pizza Simulator, which was finally the conclusion to the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise, mostly. And that game was the defining, okay, this franchise has a conclusion. There's a beginning point and there's an end point. Five Nights at Freddy's no longer can be kinda mixed into their own story that a studio will just make up. There is a cohesive story into Five Nights at Freddy's, and now it could work into a movie of multiple sequels. And as time went on, Scott would still drop a little more posts about the progress of the film, and then soon later, Chris Columbus leaves. Now, it's unknown why this happened. It's most likely because he was just sitting around and nothing was really going on. Scott and Jason had gone through a lot of scripts. They landed one, but it didn't go anywhere after that. It was almost like this movie was doomed from the start. It's like they couldn't land something. But Scott is a very determined person. He wants this movie to be perfect, he wants the fans to enjoy it, and it took a lot of people some of the best scriptwriters he's ever seen, apparently. And he still couldn't get his vision for what he would want his Five Nights at Freddy's movie to become. And it didn't take long until most people just said, it exists, we'll just keep moving along. We got an amazing finale to the game, and now there's a lot to talk about. And then after that, Ultimate Custom Night released, and that was just a trip of hell that I know a lot of streamers had problems with. But for sure, probably the best moment when that game came out was definitely Daco beating 2020. That was certainly, like, insane. And then Daco had an interview with Scott. Scott was able to talk about a few things about the movie, but it was kept to a minimum. I know that most of the time you can't really ask these questions, especially once you're in a contract and within a movie studio. You gotta keep that thing under wraps. But it's been so long that Scott, maybe had to give a little bit of droplets about the movie. Finally, we did get some news. But was it the best news we would have wanted? No, not necessarily. And unfortunately, we went through a lot more scripts, a lot more screenplays, and just a lot more of everything in general. We weren't expecting this, and as time went on, from 2017 all the way till 2020, 2021, we just heard we're back to square one. Sorry guys, we're building this up again. We have so much faith. We're so dangerously close. That quote also hurts a lot of people. One at the time would make jokes about saying, I can't wait to watch the FNAF movie when I have 3 kids or I'm in college or anything like that. And were they wrong? No, not necessarily. And for a fact, we were right. There was a lot more Scott and Jason Blum had to go through before this. And before I move on, I want to give one more special guest a little more leeway into what he may thought of this. We have Atlas White today. Let's see what he has to say.
I remember when I first heard about the FNAF movie. It was a very exciting time for me. I couldn't think of something I wanted more, in all honesty, than to see something that I loved that much becoming a movie. I wasn't honestly warm to the original idea of Chris Columbus at the helm, since to my knowledge he's not a horror director, but I was hopeful. When the cancellation occurred, I was disappointed, of course, but it wasn't all that long before we got news of a movie allegedly being adapted from a FNAF script, that being the Banana Splits movie, which was something of a consolation prize, a placeholder of sorts. Not Five Nights at Freddy's, but it would do. The rumors that the movie wasn't dead and that Scott was still working towards it were floating around, and in the back of my mind I didn't think that we would be stuck always with only the Banana Splits. Sure enough, it did eventually come to pass that the movie had been picked up by Blumhouse, with a director who seems much more in her element with the characters. And when the casting started being confirmed, I was a little overwhelmed. It meant that this was actually happening. This time, it was for real. Few things compared to the rush of seeing the teaser for the first time. I have so much love for these characters, and here they are after all this time, making the wait completely worth it, with the legendary creature shop realizing the animatronics just like we'd always been promised. It's like a dream come true, not just for me, but for everyone who ever wanted to visit Freddy Fazbear's.
Thanks to Atlas White on for this video. Really do appreciate help. And once you're done with this video, I really do recommend go check him out on Twitter. He's an amazing artist that's got some very, very good art of Five Nights at Freddy's, and currently right now, he is working on a little mini-series that's kind of a retelling of the story of Jeremy Fitzgerald that so far I've been pretty interested in. So once again, thanks to Atlas White for joining the video, and make sure to go check him out once this video is done. But after it being attached to Blumhouse, it wasn't like the thing was dropped by the studio, it was just that it was in limbo for years. As years would go on, Five Nights at Freddy's games would release, but soon, Scott dropped a pretty big bombshell. A bombshell explaining that he had a lot of scripts, a lot of screenplays for Five Nights at Freddy's. And what were these scripts and screenplays? Well, sit down. There's a lot he explained about. 2019 would show the release of Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted, the brand new game for the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise ever since the finale first occurred. Everyone kind of saw it as a celebration of Five Nights at Freddy's once again, but it had a much deeper meaning to it. Soon later, Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach would release, serving as a real sequel to that game. And, well, this game was pretty glitchy. This game was certainly a step, I can't say a step down or a step up from the original Five Nights at Freddy's games. It's definitely an improvement in being able to actually move around this giant mega pizzaplex, but the game is limited. It's really not as dark as the original games, and you could tell this game had a very different storyline that was previewed in the trailers. Then when we got in the game, Vanny didn't do much. She was basically this successor to William Afton, and she was the complete opposite of that. She was supposed to have a knife, and she didn't. That was one thing people were starting to get pissed off about, is the game starting to move towards a more child-friendly audience. And that's nowhere where the FNAF franchise should be going to. Yes, it's there, but still, you still have that older audience that has been here since the beginning and would love Five Nights at Freddy's to actually go down that dark route of lore and actually get there. But moving off topic of the games, Scott in Reddit in the year of 2021 would drop a bombshell, revealing that there were so many scripts and screenplays he had planned for Five Nights at Freddy's that just got scrapped over and over, and some of them were pretty good, some of them were really weird, but soon we would figure out which one he would land on. But for the time being, these were his screenplays. The first one was certainly interesting. This was called the F screenplay. This screenplay would be about a group of teenagers breaking into Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and chaos ensuing after that. Now, it's a setup I would definitely see a studio coming up with, but the problems this screenplay had, I'm so glad he tossed this one away. Here's what he said. Although a pretty basic setup, there was a lot of odd choices here, which only got weirder as the story continued. The story ended up with our protagonist in a secret underground animatronic factory that was designing robots for the government. Yeah, that's a screenplay. And thank God Scott threw that out the window. I'm not sure who came up with that, but that strayed so far away from the source material, and even Scott knew this. And this is something typical for movie studios to do with a video game. Yeah, they'll include the characters, but they will throw the story off so much to the point where it's just not even that franchising. Now, this next one is even more confusing. This screenplay is called The Plushies Take Manhattan. Just hear me out here. Apparently, Five Nights at Freddy's plushies were so popular that they literally wanted to make a movie about them. But Scott got to it pretty quickly. He literally said here, problem, plushies take Manhattan. Verdict, burn with fire. Yeah, he made the right choice with this one. That definitely would have been some sort of kids movie. I'm still trying to figure out to this day, what were they thinking with that? And the fact that was even a screenplay that the team had to come together and discuss is just insane. The next one was called the Random Charlie screenplay. This screenplay was a setup of Charlie and friends sneaking into Freddy's after hours to retrieve a lost toy. Now this one's kind of interesting because obviously Charlotte, is the kid that possesses the puppet. But Scott had also said, although sharing names of familiar characters from the series, these characters had nothing to do with their game and book counterparts, so while feeling similar, it would not be really that great and just feel like it was loosely based on the game, which would lose the impact of the movie. Verdict, felt like a random bag of FNAF elements, no real stakes to be honest. Yeah, I could say that's fair enough. and there's not enough stakes with them really just needing to go in there just to find a lost toy. I feel like that would just be pretty boring, to be honest, but this one was pretty close to getting made, and I could see that one actually turning out okay. This one was based off the Silver Eyes. If you have not known what this is a book series that Scott had started about a few years ago. That was obviously based on the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. It was just a little different with the names, but kind of followed the same story. At least for the first book, at least. It went kind of off the rails. At least versions of the Silver Eyes screenplay over the course of a year, trying to find the right approach to bring the story from the first book. Now, just making a video game movie, not even about the video game, but from the book, is pretty weird. And apparently the problems with this is that there were just many attempts that Scott made to write a screenplay about this, but he realized it was kind of difficult to find someone else that understood the lore well enough to do it. And also, unfortunately, it meant the screenplays would suffer greatly because he wasn't that experienced with writing, and so was Kira. So the verdict was, it had some good elements, but it was mostly a screenplay focusing more on the books than the games. And that's not something I don't think many people would really want out of the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, you know? So I could see why Scott would most likely throw this out. Not bad, but it could be better. Next up was the Pawn Shop screenplay. The setup of this was a kid who watches after a pawn shop finds trouble when an animatronic is brought in. It turns out to be a Freddie who has been robbed, and the other animatronics were taken to different locations for sale. The other animatronics come to retrieve the one at the pawn shop, and the kid and his friends get roped into adventure. Now, surprisingly, Scott had this one up for a while. It was pretty creative, but felt a little too more just about a story about a boy and his animatronic. More like Freddie was being the Iron Giant, and it just felt like this whole thing it was a good idea, but it just didn't have that horror element to it, and once again, strays way too far away from the games. This just kind of seems like something a fan project would do, not something being the main and first Five Nights at Freddy's movie. The next one was the Cassidy screenplay. Now this one, a lot of people that are invested in the lore would love, but at the same time it was a little too much. This setup was going to be diving deep into the lore, specifically following the story of Cassidy. This, obviously, she is the child that possessed Golden Freddy, and this would have gone really, really deep. It would span multiple time periods following multiple characters and featuring lore from multiple games. But at the same time, this was pretty saturated, and to the fault that it would have left the majority of people confused and lost, and yeah, this was the most accurate screenplay to the games, but at the same time, the lore of this game is just way too complicated to the point where you gotta leave leeway to where it's accurate, but it's not throwing everything at you in one movie. So I could see why it's basically more of a visual encyclopedia more than a movie. It just wasn't even satisfying. To Scott, too, which is pretty surprising. The basic setup of this screenplay is called The Misfit Kid, and this screenplay is about a single mom who brings her kid into a new town and finds Freddy's. Hilarity ensues. Now this kinda had a bunch of problems. One of the problems is that creating a modern day story with an old Freddy setting is finding the way to connect the protagonist to the restaurant, and you can't really do that if you set this movie in the modern day. So there'd be problems for why does this kid have a reason to go to Freddy's? And it would just feel a little too forced, and the story and narrative would just feel off and pretty weird. So it makes sense for Scott to throw this out the window, and surprisingly, this was a script and screenplay that was in Blumhouse for a while, so I'm really surprised that one was staying. The next two would bothly be about mostly ghost trackers, and this time, group of amateur ghost hunters breaks its into a Freddy Fazbear location, and chaos ensues after that. Although Scott said this was very common sense for this kind of movie, the problem again rose for how they would give these characters to Freddy's itself. These characters wouldn't really have a connection to the location and these characters, so it would kind of feel like too much on the stories and their own backstories and hardships that would take the spotlight away from Freddy's. The next one was called the Insane Screenplay, another Ghost Tracker variation, this time involving the Funtime animatronics in an underground ball pit, tunnels, and a marionette out for revenge. Now this one, I don't think they should start the first Five Nights at Freddy's movie being based on the Funtime animatronics. As cool as a movie would be with the Funtime animatronics, I would not put that there until either a flashback or another movie down the line. I just don't see a fit for them if we haven't even seen the original gang yet. And then, after that, finally, Scott came up with something called the Mike Screenplay. He felt, how did he not think of this before? It was so clever and yet so brilliant, and it would really work as a Five Nights at Freddy's movie. So, he announced on Reddit that this was the screenplay he was going with, and filming would begin in spring. Now that's great and all, everyone is hyped. But the thing after reading all these screenplays was, you finally cracked down on a script by then realizing you could use the main character you've been using and playing as for the entire franchise being Mike Schmidt or Afton? Yeah, it confused me too. But still, it's great to see that Scott finally had an idea of where he wanted this movie to go, and filming was supposed to start in spring until it didn't, and we didn't hear anything. Don't worry, the Mike Screenplay was still going on, but it kinda went quiet for a while. But anyways, I do want to give another special guest time to explain their experience with this movie, and how it's almost crazy that this movie is practically here now. Today we have Queenie Boy on for this video. He also has a really cool Five Nights at Freddy's documentary releasing sometime this month. So make sure to go check him out and let's see what he has to say.
So, when this comes out, I mean, the Five Nights at Freddy's movie is officially here, which is really insane, like, to say in any capacity, because we've waited 9 years for this. Like, it has been 9 years of delays, pondering if it's ever gonna happen, hoping, looking around for anything we could get, and we're finally all about to go to the theater, or we've gone to the theater at this point, and experienced this together as a community. And I just feel like that's the best part about this movie finally coming out and being a thing, is that we can all go to a theater together and experience it and be hyped, and just, it's gonna be amazing. And I hope that you guys love the movie. I'm so excited to see it, and it's just really crazy that it's been a 9-year ride, and most things that have gone like this, that have taken years and years and years to come, I don't think a lot of the time it's worth the wait in some aspect, but I feel like to a lot of extents that this is going to be worth the wait, because the main priority with this movie was to make the fans happy, and I feel they really achieved that already with just the trailers, what we've gotten to see, how much they've talked and promoted this movie. I think they got something really special on their hands, and it's going to be something amazing for all of us to experience. Seeing this movie come to fruition over the past couple months, from the talks we've gotten, from Jason Blum leaving that cryptic message of just the people at Jim Henson working on the animatronics, with that little Freddy sculpt that we all knew as soon as we saw it that was Freddy Fazbear. Like, that's the stuff that's made this so awesome, is experiencing the hype together. Like, we all lost our minds when we first saw that. It's been over a year now since we got the announcement from Jason Blum that they were going to be filming. They got the director, that Jim Henson was doing the animatronics. So it's just been probably one of the craziest rides of any film I've ever been looking forward to, just because of, like, how long it's been. We went from Warner Brothers to Christopher Columbus that was the guy who made Harry Potter, and then he backed out. And then we went to nothing for a long time after we found out about Blumhouse. And now we are here, and we get to experience this, and we get to talk about it, and it's going to be amazing. And I think something else is that we need to just, like, give a round of applause to all the actors and the people who made this movie possible, because if they did not sit here and push for this to happen, I don't think we'd have this movie right now. Or not even think. I know we wouldn't have this movie right now, because these are all extremely passionate people about this franchise. The way they talk about it, they care about it. And I think that's the most important and amazing thing about this movie, is that it was made with 100% care in mind. And that's just amazing. I don't think you could get anything better than that. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for Queemy Boy for coming on to this video. I really appreciate it. And his channel is also really great. And it may be a hunch if his documentary is out. I'm currently recording this like a month in advance, so I wouldn't really know. But if it's out around this time, make sure to go check it out. If it's not, just go over and subscribe to his channel. And when that video does release, I'll definitely let you guys know, and definitely go check out that big documentary that he's been working on. Now, yeah, we're starting to get into the end game of this movie. I mean, now it's gotten pretty quiet. We finally have a screenplay, and now it's gonna be all steam ahead after this. And wow, once 2022 hit, everything changed. Now, before I get into the meat of this chapter, there was one other movie that released in 2021 that I know caught every FNAF fan's attention, and that movie you may know very well as Willy's Wonderland. The movie starring Nicolas Cage brutally destroying animatronics in a FNAF-esque explory and plot and everything, but honestly, this movie was way more fun than I thought it was. A group of dudes thought it would be such a cool idea to make a movie similar to Five Nights at Freddy's, but just with Nicolas Cage beating the crap out of the animatronics instead of sitting in his office. And now it's back in October of 2019. Screenwriter Parsons had an idea based off of obviously Five Nights at Freddy's, and apparently this caught Nicolas Cage's attention, who agreed to participate as both the lead actor and producer. I noticed Nicolas Cage had a period of time where he was doing a lot of smaller films that really uplifted sales of those films, and honestly, Nicolas Cage is really great for that, and he's also just a great actor in general. Lewis was hired as director in December of 2019, while the rest of the cast joined February 2020. This movie was supposed to release in October of 2020, but obviously stuff happened, and obviously that wasn't the case. The movie was obviously being caught of attention by Five Nights at Freddy's fans, and honestly, I do not think anyone would know this movie's existence if it wasn't for the YouTuber 3C Films, who unfortunately is not in this video today, but if it wasn't for him making these videos, I would have not found out about it. Many FNAF fans would have not found out about this movie, and I was following his videos, seeing the production of this movie, and this was a really great team that wasn't just making this for a cheap crash grab, which actually was not the case. This was a group of very talented people that knew the source material, wanted to make something cool out of it, and it was just a great movie overall. Instead of the animatronics being possessed by children, instead they were possessed by serial killers, which actually gives them the motive to definitely be destroyed. And the crazy part about this movie is that Nicolas Cage doesn't say a single word. They keep him as a muted character, and it's just perfect. It's just amazing the way they do it. And honestly, I definitely check out this movie once in a while, every now and then, and I definitely watched it leading up to the FNAF movie just to get me in the FNAF mood. And well, actually, this actually wasn't the only FNAF-esque movie that would release around this time. A year after, we would get Night 5. Now, this is a fan project that was released on YouTube not too long ago, about a year ago once I'm posting this video. And it was also a fan project built together by the guys that made that Five Nights at Freddy's in real life video that really, really blew up with really cool costumes and everything, and how, accurate the set looked to the games. So the people over there decided, hey, we could make a Five Nights at Freddy's movie out of this. We have the costumes, we have the set. Why not? It would be a missed opportunity not to. And they did. They released it in November of 2022, and you know what? It was actually pretty decent. The budget that they used it wisely, and it worked. I definitely found myself invested in the movie, and it's on YouTube right now. If you really do want to go check it out, it's a pretty good movie. And for that to be a fan project, being almost an hour and 50 minutes long, that's an accomplishment. I really do recommend you guys go check that out. But getting off topic of those fan projects, we gotta get to the meat of this. Eventually, we would find out this little mischievous tweet from Jason Blum telling us all that the Jim Henson Company was making the animatronics. We had the small image of a Freddy Fazbear statue that we all know that what it was. It was just hidden there, but we all knew exactly what it was. It would go quiet again, which is typical. But fair enough, we're getting a lot more updates than we normally would. And after that, we knew this film was steam ahead after this. Well, technically, the movie was supposed to start filming in spring of 2021. I guess that kind of fell out. I'm not sure what happened there. We really don't know if Scott just didn't feel satisfied or something, or just pandemic rules were just really holding the film back, which might have been the case actually, now that I think about it. But we did get some news towards the tail end of 2022, and I kid you not, this news broke the internet. And I present to you Shaggy as William Afton. When I woke up that morning and saw the casting announcement for Five Nights at Freddy's, the two main leads, I could not believe what I was reading. Matthew Lillard as William Afton and Josh Hutcherson as Mike Schmidt, or Afton. I was shocked. First of all, everyone was super excited after seeing this. I was like, we actually have a casting for Mike and William. Now, a lot of people were originally thinking that it would be a pretty cool fan cast, if they made William Dafoe William Afton, which, yes, that could work. He's a really talented actor too, but Matthew Lillard is just as great. He was literally from the original Scream. He knows what he's doing. Most people know him as Shaggy, and it was a meme for like a month and a half, but also Josh Hutcherson also kind of fits the role of Mike. Now that I kind of just look at it, we've never really gotten like a full image of what Mike looks like, but he just looks like a Mike, if that even makes sense. So, once again, quiet again, then we heard that Emma Tammy would be the director. Now, everyone didn't really have much to say about this, since not a lot of people have seen her films. She had some few films that have like mixed reviews, so you were going into this movie with really not so great expectations, but it's kind of in the middle. You don't know how it's going to turn out. Then once again, it goes quiet. After that, we also found out that Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach was also getting DLC called FNAF Ruin, which we also had to wait quite a while for that. And once again, more and more casting announcement would come out. We would finally figure out that Mike would actually have a sister, and her name would be Abby. Now, Abby sounds a lot like Baby from Five Nights at Freddy's sister location. Now, a lot of people started thinking, oh no, they're already twisting the lore up already. But honestly, this is probably for the best. And maybe they'll do their own version of the story. This will keep people anticipating and not expecting stuff to happen in the movie. It'll still follow the same formula, but we may be surprised in a few aspects, which Scott probably knows that if they really did a film completely accurate for the games, beat for beat, it would be nice to see that all in live action, but it would kind of just be like, yeah, I knew this was happening. I don't know why you guys are so surprised. It's good to make a film adaptation like the games, but also its own thing. And I think that's what Scott finally realized, and it works a lot with what he came up with. And after that, we would finally see more and more casting for Ghost Children. We would see castings for, obviously, Hank. Hank was a big popular casting after that. We really didn't know much about him. He just looked like a Henry Emily, and everyone kind of thought that for a while. Later we would figure out, yeah, no, that was not the case. But it was still cool nonetheless. He's a really great guy. He was always replying to comments. He was always shouting out people. He's a great actor. I really cannot wait to see him in the actual movie. And also, as we were creeping closer, another video game movie was also preparing to release, that being the Super Mario Bros. Movie. And first of all, that movie was really great. Although it had issues, which I've put in my other videos from the past, you can go check those out. I like the movie. It's honestly, personally, my favorite movie from Illumination, and honestly, I think it's way up there in the better video game adaptations. Like, it's in the top 3 or 2 for me. And it's crazy, on the same day the movie came out, I checked Twitter, and Jason Blum, he always does these tweets at the most convenient times. He drops the first photo from the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, releasing October 27th, 2023. This, once again, broke the internet. Finding out that we were actually getting this movie this year. Like, we heard filming was starting in February, and while we did get some snippets of filming, we would eventually see what the sign for Freddy Fazbear's Pizza would look like. There was like this whole thing for a week about people not liking Freddy's white gloves, but we wouldn't actually have that on him in the actual film. But it was just insane that we were getting it this year. I honestly was expecting this to come out in 2024, but nope. They got this film done really quickly. And honestly, that made it even better. And then I guess also Warner Brothers said the Minecraft movie was coming out in 2025. But that got overshadowed by the FNAF movie. We were getting this movie we've waited for so long, finally releasing this year. And it's just insane how close we are right now to this film's release. And then, in May of 2023, the first teaser dropped. And, oh my god, the rush of excitement when I pressed play on that video, I don't think I'm gonna be able to replicate for any other trailer that releases. It was just insane hearing, "Welcome to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, where fantasy and fun come to life." It took 9 years for that to happen, and I'm so glad I now can hear it in live action. And obviously seeing the animatronics for the first time, that was just cool in itself. It was amazing to see what they look like. And once again, they are so accurate to the games. Minus one little detail, which turned the internet upside down for like a month. You kind of know this pretty well. It was the red eyes. This was certainly a choice to have the animatronics have red eyes, because normally in the games, no, that's not really the case. It's just soulless white dotted eyes that you would see, which makes it a lot more creepy. But I guess they wanted to go with red eyes to equal, ooh, they're bad. But that's kind of too cheesy, and a lot of people kind of saw that as, it's a dumb change they're adding to the animatronics. But honestly, I didn't mind them. I wish they would maybe turn down the red, because it just looks like you can barely see their pupils. But I think they actually really did listen, and a month later we would actually see changes. But the poster would stay the same. Honestly, I think I like the poster with the red eyes. It adds distinctness to it, you know? Although they did change it months later, but I think I still prefer the red one. I mean, I have it in my room. I don't plan on getting another poster for it. But, man. Once we got the first trailer for the movie, then the hype train officially begun. And seeing, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza actually being, real, and seeing all these references to the games, And on top of that, Scott brought out a lot of people to be in this movie. Not too many. Unfortunately, Markiplier couldn't be in the movie because he had scheduling conflicts because he was also filming another movie called Iron Lung. I think that's what the movie was called, Iron Lung. And on top of that, we were able to finally get to see Corey X Kenshin in a Five Nights at Freddy's movie. That we had hints of when, unfortunately, the movie got leaked for like a week or so, and everybody hated the guy that did that. I thankfully turned off Twitter for like a week after that, but it was crazy to just see him in that movie. Corey X Kenshin has come such a long way. So, Fusion and a few other YouTubers actually get to go see the Five Nights at Freddy's set. While this was back in February, we didn't get to see what they actually were seeing until pretty much October now. But seeing their reactions to seeing these lifelike, and they look so realistic, it's actually insane. The Five Nights at Freddy's animatronics just look so good. Blumhouse and Jim Henson's Creature Shop just did a phenomenal job. I know they were the people that also made the Dark Crystal, so I knew these things were in good hands. And seeing our first version of Springbonnie is just also insane. I know Matthew Lillard is going to kill it once this movie releases. And man, as time went on and we just kept seeing more mini trailers for it, it just rose the hype even more. And well, we're in the month of the movie's release. But before I get into the conclusion of this story, I do want to give one final guest to give their thoughts of this whole situation. And that YouTuber is ID's Fantasy. Take it away.
I joined the Five Nights at Freddy's fandom back at the end of 2021 when Security Breach came out, and by that point in time, most of the people I had talked to in the fan base about the movie seemed to have more or less given up on the idea that it would ever happen. Being new to the scene, I was holding out hope because, it's such a cool thing. So when the announcement finally came out that, hey, this movie is happening, we have casting going on, and also starts filming in February of 2023, that was so incredibly cool to see that, after so much time, they didn't give up on this project. I've read, I believe since then, that, people behind the movie were telling Scott and Jason Blum to give up on the movie because they thought it wasn't going to go anywhere. I could be wrong about this, but they pulled it. They pulled through. They made it happen, and we're now so close to the movie coming out, and it's honestly pretty incredible. Just seeing the casting come together, the set photos, the trailers, everything, it's just all coming together in such a cool way, and it's pretty wild. I chose a great time to join the fandom, it would seem. What with all the new games and the movie, it's great. I'm very glad that I get to be here for this.
Thank you so much to ID's Fantasy for coming on to this video. I really appreciate it, and once again, she's also got some great Five Nights at Freddy's videos. So make sure, after this video is done, to definitely go check her out. And now, we reach the conclusion of the story. At the time of this video's release, the Five Nights at Freddy's movie is out. So let us enter the last chapter. At the time of me recording this, we are only a few days away Five Nights at Freddy's movie releasing. This has been a very, very long journey to get here, all the way back in April of 2015 when we all heard this movie was supposed to come out. There were multiple delays, scripts, and everything in between. This is probably have been one of the craziest rides I've seen with a film in recent years, and it's just insane how dedicated Scott and Jason Blum were. Jason, throughout the film industry, was laughed at, actually, for trying so hard to make this movie happen. People told him it just wasn't going to happen. It just wasn't possible. And the same goes for Scott. People were telling him to just give it up, you're wasting your time. But they still kept going, kept trying new things, kept trying new scripts. And we're here today with this film that we've been waiting for so long, that is going to be played in front of millions and millions of people. Some newcomers, some people that have been waiting here since the beginning. It's a real celebration of all the times we had together, and it's just, for some people, a reliving of their childhood. A lot of people grew up on this game, and to see it brought to the big screen, and to finally see Freddie, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, Golden Freddy, and whoever else more on the big screen for the first time is still a surreal moment to me, and I know millions of fans. The Five Nights at Freddy's movie I know is going to mean a lot to people. Whether you're watching it from home, or whether you're watching it on the biggest screen possible, I hope everyone really does enjoy this movie. I know I am definitely seeing this movie day one, and I'm going to love it. I know I really am. And to you, my viewer and viewers that were watching this, I just want to say thank you. The fact that you watched this thing through the entire way through means more than you actually can know. I've worked on this thing for a while. Side note, besides FNAF, the channel Chili Chivy has had a crazy ride this year. We've started from those Puss in Boots videos, blowing up, to then moving to animated movies reviews, and then moving to a passion project I wanted to start over the summer, and I've met so many talented creators. And not just to mention, I just want to thank all the creators that were in this video. Your help means so much to me, and it wouldn't have been possible to put this thing together without your guys' help. And